a red flag flying here.
And we're ready to go. Welcome to Political Unmuted. Last week, 1,000 views of that might be somebody who includes all the people who watched the first 5 seconds and thought, oh no, no more of that for me. But nevertheless, 1,000 views. That's unbelievable, people. So congratulations to that. And with me, I have the dream team. Whose knowledge and experience and insights you thrill to every week. Paul Daly, hello.
Hello.
Laura Lee Daly, hello.
Hello.
And the key member of the group, the one who can multitask, and we'll be watching your comments as we go through the show. Hi, Sam. So lovely to see you.
Hello.
God bless you. God bless you. We are missing today Stuart Sutherland. He can't make it to be with us, which is going to be heartbreaking because Stuart has developed quite a little fan club for himself. He gets fan mail. I'll tell you this, people asking him to kiss the letters and send them back and things like that. He's quite the star of the show. And so, Stuart, I think you promised you were listening in anyway. If people watching it later, you're deeply missed. But unfortunately, we have a most able replacement. Hi, Charlotte Austin. Welcome to Political Unmuted.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Now, I know that you've been on Political ACLIF Radio when we weren't visual and people could only imagine what you looked like from the sound of your voice. But for anybody who's joining us new here, tell us a bit about yourself, Charlotte.
So I'm from Bishop Auckland.
We can't all be perfect.
What else? So I've just started a job working for Socialist magazine and environmental publication Red Pepper. So that's what I do with myself.
What does that involve? I mean, I'm just fascinated by this. Tell us a bit about Red Pepper.
Red Pepper started in 1994 to be a mouthpiece for the socialist and mostly kind of environmentalist movement. And nowadays we're politically independent, as in we don't kind of like follow a specific party or anything, or really ideology, to be honest, other than we're left wing and we bring in really like kind of diverse contributors and journalists, and we don't just write about politics. We've got a big culture section because there is more to life than politics. Well, let's discuss it for an hour.
Do you have to pay to get this? Is it online and worked by advertising? I mean, do you have a subscription? How do you get to read this magazine?
So we have a website where everything's free. There's no paywall. And we fund that through like ethical advertising. So like we do a lot of things like renewable energy companies will advertise with us or stuff like that, or trade unions, whatever. But then you can subscribe to get Red Pepper in print, and that is on a pay-as-you-feel basis, and I highly recommend it. I think that'll be the plugging I'll do tonight, but it's a really good...
Plug away. You're very, very welcome. And may I just pry a little bit more? What is your role? Because you've only just got this job, haven't you? What is your role at Red Pepper? So
my job is to focus on all of the hands-on nitty-gritty stuff. So sales, subscriptions, fundraising, and events is my domain, which is obviously a really interesting time to start working on. Interesting, should I say, difficult and challenging time to start working for a kind of not-for-profit magazine, because we rely on a lot of sales from events, physical events, so they're all going online, and a lot of people are having to cancel their subscriptions because their livelihoods have been damaged by the coronavirus and its economic impact, but we'll soldier on as we always do. Well, if at some time you can put on the comments list the website for Red Pepper, that would be lovely. And please mention it at the end when we're saying goodbye, and we'll try and persuade people to join up. It's just so good
to have you on the show. Sort of, I am not going to let you get away without pointing out that you are an absolute political rising superstar, sort of a member of the Labour Party National Policy Forum, exceptionally able, and we're looking for some genius insights today. Not putting any pressure on you or anything like that, but sort of really welcome to the show. And with the welcomes done, welcome to all the listeners, and well. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Moment of the week.
Oh, did it not happen?
Yeah.
Ah, there's a reason for that. It's happened in my ears. Nothing wrong with dead air.
It's okay. This is visual, so it isn't just nothing. There's four faces getting slightly bewildered. Okay, moment of the week. Now, Samantha, I'm going to come to you first, you came up with the most brilliant idea midweek, which you should have brought up amongst your big ideas in the big story last week, but failed us on that. So I'm going to give you a chance now to sort of, and if any dragons are out there watching, this woman is worth investing in. Listen to this.
Yeah, right. Hear me out. Remote controls need to be brightly coloured. Right, because black is an invisible colour. You don't see it, and when you've got 3 kids like I do, the remote control is never where you need it to be. And yeah, I'm like, why are they even black? This is terrible design. Why did they do this to us? I had lots of friends who commented, and they had all kinds of tape and things and vinyl stickers they put on their remote control, but that's not the point. Right? We deserve good design in these basic household items. And black is a bad colour for remote controls. So there you go.
It's an absence of colour, not an actual colour. And we used to look after 2 girls between school and their parents finishing work. And they used to come, and sort of the beggars used to hide the remote every single time. Sometimes we just used to give up and not have to watch any television that night. And sort of it was hours and hours. So what you need those things like you can get for keys where you whistle and it sort of whistles back at you. Anyway, what was your moment of the week?
So it is linked to something we're going to talk about, but I'm not going to talk about the thing we're going to talk about. I went on my first protest since lockdown today. Obviously protests are something that not a lot of people appreciate at the best of times, so obviously it was socially distanced, it was very responsible. I wore a mask even though you wouldn't usually wear a mask when you're outside in Newcastle, even during a pandemic. The masks are for inside, but no, wore a mask. And you won't be able to see this properly because it's mirror. Oh no, you might actually. I can't see it properly, but I think it'll come up all right for the viewers. I made myself a placard. I always do something. There you go. And then on the other hand, on the other side.
Can we do some commentary? Because this does go out as a podcast as well.
All right, what
good point.
Sam is showing us is the first slide. It says, Boris, you okay, hon? Has anyone checked the fridge? And on the other side, there's a picture of Boris, and he's holding up a message saying, "Can I hide in your fridge?" And sort of, and it says, "Where's Boris?"
Yeah, because I mean, let's face it, the exam fiasco that we're going to talk about later. The reason they did this U-turn is because they suddenly clicked that they were messing up a whole generation of voters who were going to be very passionately voting in the next opportunity. but it's still not good enough. You know, the leader of this country needs to address those young people and apologise personally. And he's not, because he's on holiday, because he doesn't do crises. He doesn't like disrupting his routine when there's pesky things going on like Cobra meetings about pandemics, and a whole generation of young people going through mental anguish because of his government's decisions. So yeah, my moment of the week is just highlighting that fact to people at this protest today. You know, where is Boris? Why doesn't he think he needs to represent these young people?
I was reading a thing in a European newspaper today that doesn't think he'll last, and they think that it's just too hard work for Boris. He takes 3 hours and naps in the middle of the day. He doesn't turn up for meetings. He's not a hard worker, and suddenly, of course, it's very hard work. Thank you, Sam. Moment of the week, and I sort of I've missed the protest. Laura.
Yeah.
Now, when we were talking before, you were absolutely full of ideas for moments of the week.
Yeah.
Have you actually come up with an idea?
I don't know if I should say Samantha's plait skills now, actually. I've been watching you put your plaits in. Amazing. No, so my moment of the week, I think, is going to have to be, and I'm going to explain it, John, because I don't want to come across as a violent person, because I'm not. I abhor violence. I don't agree with it. It's not a method that anybody should use for any reason. That said, there's been a video released this week, and it's been all over the news, of a gentleman who was basically knocked clean out on a metro. And the reason it's my moment of the week is because I feel like I learned something about myself when I watched it. It came up in little clips. And I didn't know anything about this story at the time when I saw it. One of my friends had shared it on Facebook, so I clicked on it, but I must have watched it backwards. So I watched this fella getting smacked, and he was spark out lying on a metro, and I was just like, oh my God, is he okay? And I was really worried about him. He looked like he wasn't going to move. It was really awful. I was like, it doesn't matter. No one deserves that. No one. I really hate violence. And then I started clicking through what had happened beforehand. And I do want to be a person who thinks violence is not the answer. And I do believe that. And this woman was shouting, well, he deserved it. And I was like, no one deserves that. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, right, I'm going to have to work really hard to be a good person here and stick with it. Because basically what had happened was this fellow was hurling abuse at some black men who were on the metro with him. The usual stuff you hear about, get back to your own country, this is my country, not yours, and some horrendous stuff that I wouldn't repeat. And it was really vile. And he was so cocky with it and thought he was all that. And I can see why it ended the way it did. I don't promote that behaviour, but it did sort of feel a bit like, well, maybe you should keep your mouth shut. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. That's what my mum taught me. So that was
absolutely
the
right.
highlight of the week for me.
It karma, isn't it? We'll put it down to karma. Paul, moment of the week.
I'm a bit worried in case I stamp on anyone's toes here, because I was going to talk about what I think really, had this been later in the week, it probably would have been the topic for tonight. Matt Hancock and getting rid of Public Health England. You weren't going to say that, were you, Charlotte?
No.
Oh, good. I'm not standing on any toes then. Thank goodness for that. But so they've got rid of Public Health England because obviously that was the problem. It wasn't their response, and it wasn't their terrible PPE contracts or track and trace, which is world beating. Which I now think everything that Boris Johnson says about everything, if you read it as sarcastic, it's much more believable. So when he's going, oh, it's a world-beating service, he actually means it's definitely not. It's terrible. Or, you know, all these things that he says, they're not true, are they? So they've decided that it's now going to be a different thing, and it is going to be headed by Dido Harding. And if you're wondering who she is, she's in the House of Lords as a baroness, a Conservative peer, She's married to a Conservative MP. She was largely in charge of the test, track and trace system, the world-beating test, track and trace. And she also presided over Talk Talk when they had a huge data breach. So it's more like Conservatives taking advantage. It's like it's almost like that Littlefinger thing from Game of Thrones. Chaos is a ladder, and actually we can put someone absolutely awful, but like they'll be our awful. Just like we've got Matt Hancock, and just like we've got Gavin Williamson, we can have these awful people in these positions of authority who are really incompetent, but it doesn't matter because they're loyal, and that's the important thing as far as they're concerned. It's the loyalty to them, not the competence of doing it, because I don't think anyone could think this person without a scientific background who presided over basically a disaster for Talk Talk and who is so politically close to them could lead a body to replace Public Health England who, hang on, I thought we were saying that the NHS have done a really good job. Well, if they haven't done a really good job, when did that happen? I thought it was the procurement that was a problem, not Public Health England itself. And it's a mess.
This is such a big topic, and it would have. You're absolutely right. And in any other week, it would have been one of the main topics. I mean, has anybody else got anything else they want to add to this absolute scandal? In my opinion, no. No.
Kim has loyally put some links in the comment thread if anybody wants to look Dido Harding up.
I mean, she was appointed without any form of process of going through to make sure she was the best for the job. She was just given the job off the top. It's clear cronyism, and
we're becoming a banana monarchy. It's like we're not a republic, so we can't become a banana republic. But they're just acting, they're just doing these things, and we've seen this week what happens when people challenge that, when people say, no, we're not going to accept this. We really shouldn't be accepting this kind of thing. We should be absolutely furious, but I do think it's that whole tactic of, let's just tire them out. Let's just do these awful things. And if you're doing so many awful things and everyone's blaming everyone for everything, then, people start to get tired and apathetic towards it.
Absolutely brazen. And sort of, I put a couple of memes on this week, and one of the memes I said is that this is the Tories' attitude to a disaster, and it was carpe diem, and it seize the day, and every disaster for the right-minded person is an opportunity. So you have a crash, and sort of the money men make millions of it, and there's firms and individuals have made billions of pounds out of this pandemic, I think we're going to be talking about exam results in 2 seconds. Yeah. I think that this exams thing was, we could just make this work for ourselves, so that we can just make this work and sort of get our children better results. And certainly this is an absolute blatant example of the sort of, what we'll do is here is a chance to put someone in position of authority over the NHS who believes it ought to be shut down.
And also there's the privatisation thing as well, because Matt Hancock's saying how important it is to get the private sector involved and what a great job they've done with their, that rat poison company that did so badly with the PPE. That's the kind of thing that we want in the NHS. And when people are saying the NHS it wasn't going to be privatised and those Russian documents, or it was just Russia hacking these real documents, that's what we should be worried about. Not the fact that we actually intend to have more private involvement in the NHS and give more public money to these private companies and let them make more profit for a poorer service. That is what they're aiming for, and they're being absolutely brazen.
Yep, absolutely. So moving on, finally, moment of the week, Charlotte. Wow.
Okay. First of all, Paul and anyone else, did you see that the government were also thinking about scrapping Ofqual? I don't know a lot about Ofqual or what exactly it does.
I would suspect that. I'm not a great fan of Ofqual personally, but they are under the direction of the government.
Right. I'm normally suspicious of anything that involves like government ministers having more control over things, like
Yes, definitely.
oversight, but who knows what will happen there. Anyway, so my moment of the week, I picked something uplifting because I think it's nice to talk about uplifting stories, as rare as they might be in these days and ages. But I saw on BBC News, this couple in Kidderminster had a socially distant wedding reception in their street. So it was like a 1920s themed street party because they couldn't have like a proper wedding reception in a like pub or out. So they were like, all their neighbours were like doing karaoke, and you know, it's just quite uplifting to like, people are just like, well, we can't have the wedding we planned or we wanted, well, let's just like, I don't know, do something. Like, a wedding's a wedding, and if you love somebody and you want to get married to them, then you shouldn't need to have like this big grand ceremony. So I thought that was nice, and it, you know, just shows people like trying to come together and support one another, even though we're in kind of like difficult times. I remember at the start of the pandemic hearing something like that the slogan should be physically distant, not socially distant, like physical distance but social solidarity. So yeah, that's my feel-good story of the week.
Sometimes a disaster of a wedding is more memorable than when it all goes perfectly. And sort of, my wife and I were married on special license with 3 days' notice. We just threw out the children's child allowance and went down to the local hotel, and well, we went to the registry office in Bishop Auckland, and then took 2 friends to go and have a meal at a hotel. And sort of, yeah, absolutely right. Paul, did you have a lovely white wedding with everything perfect?
We had our wedding reception in a student union nightclub. So it was a really big party. What we did is we didn't want to not invite people, so we decided to have, you know, we had the nice church wedding, and it was really lovely. But we also invited as many people as we could. We didn't want anyone to feel like they weren't welcome at our wedding. And you know, when you're saying, oh, well, we've got like big families, and we wanted everyone to be able to come together and have a great time. So rather than
difference
spend
between people like
£1,000
you,
a head.
that's the difference between people like you, who everybody loves, and people like me, who everybody hates. Sam, what was your wedding like?
We've just had our 10th wedding anniversary, actually, so quite nice.
Congratulations.
Yeah, we had an out, so we just went to Bishop Auckland Registry Office, which has a capacity of about 22, I think, and then had a reception at Sheldon Civic Hall, which is a fantastic venue for anybody that's been there. Obviously, it's still going. Since then, Sheldon Civic Hall is now licensed for weddings themselves, so that's quite nice for anybody who wants a bit more of a non-conventional service but doesn't want to pay millions and millions of pounds to go to a hotel.
Well, thank you. We've now overrun by 10 minutes.
Well, you wanted to hear about our weddings.
But it was interesting. The first question, I think I'm going to start off with Paul to briefly introduce us. Who has clearly been promoted beyond his ability? Just fill us in on what's been happening, Paul.
So Frank Spencer lookalike Gavin Williamson has decided to wait for months and months and months. So for months and months and months, they've been trying to work out what's going to happen with exams, and they cancelled exams way back. So for a while in schools, we've been asked to, like, you know, we had to do a ranking system for all the students within our classes, and we also had to give estimated grades. Now, I don't teach A-level, but A-level's been exactly the same as that. And they have this week released the results, and they've designed an algorithm through Ofqual, which is the exam regulatory board, that they have known about for quite some time. They knew how it was going to do it because at the very last minute, they'd ran this algorithm and they'd realised that it kind of underestimated how much the difference between state schools and private schools they wanted to have. So they changed the algorithm, they changed the criteria so that smaller groups wouldn't be included in it. So private schools ended up with really good results and everyone else ended up with less good results on average, when you're talking average. So there'll be individual differences here. Some people have done well and some people won't have done, but this algorithm basically looked at the past performance of a school and then said, right, well, all you can possibly do is the same as your previous past performance over this period of time. And so if you had someone who was really, really talented in that year group, who was going to get like 3 A's, but the maximum your school's ever had was 3 B's, then that person would be limited to that. And there would be a rank order in which people would be allocated a grade based upon their ranking in the school. So it's basically the school were allocated the grade and the people within that school were ranked and they filled up the slots. So they had a certain number of A's or B's or C's or whatever. So we saw a lot of people from poorer backgrounds being disadvantaged by this.
I mean, one of the things that I noted there was that sort of, if you ran out of grades, the person who was at the bottom of your list, or persons plural who were at the bottom of your list, if you'd run out of grades, it didn't matter what you'd given them, you had to give them a U because you'd just run out. And sort of, so this was why there were a whole load of children, young people who were being given C's and B's and actually came away with an unclassified fail result. And they were absolutely devastated. The lives were ruined by this. It was obviously a stupid thing. And I saw one person making fun of it, saying that they're going to take the championship off Leicester City that year because Leicester City had never won the championship before. So how could they possibly have won it this year? And I saw one dreadful poor young man who'd want it to be his school's first Cambridge student, because he wasn't allowed. Charlotte, how angry were you on this with this score of 0 to 10?
Off the scale, John, off the scale, because it really does, like like that the thing about like 24/7 news cycle that we're all used to in this modern day and age is that you are constantly angry about a lot of things, and it's like sometimes you become a bit kind of numb to it all. But this really hit home to me as somebody who would have probably been really disadvantaged by that system myself. And like the press and Twitter and whatever, concentrated on the kids who had missed out on their Oxford or Cambridge offers, because that obviously makes the most headlines. It's the most compelling. Or maybe it's the kind of like the dream of kids who are gonna win the Premiership like Leicester City. But what about the kids who like you said, the schools had run out of grades, so they got unclassified. The kids who weren't going to uni but were hoping to enter the job market with those A levels, whose futures were now in complete disarray. Like the people who can't afford to don't have the option to go through clearing or can't afford to support themselves for a year when they can't resit their A levels. That's those kids I'm equally as angry for.
And Charlotte, one of the issues which is coming up is that even though the government has U-turned on it, those their places have been given away, and particularly Oxford University has just come out and said we're not changing that now. We're not going to find places for those children that we turned down. So even though the government has returned, futures are ruined here. People have had their lives ruined.
And that's another way in which it's going to disproportionately hit working class kids, because what Oxford and Cambridge University have said is that if we can't, I think actually quite a lot of universities have said, is that if we can't fulfill your offer this year, you're going to have to wait until next year to take up your place. Now, what if your family can't support you to live at home for another year, if you can't find a job because you don't have the qualifications and stuff like that? It's just going to hit working class kids who can't afford to take that year out more than like better off kids whose parents can afford to support them and or find good internships for them and all of these kind of rich and rewarding experiences, because like there's like nothing more depressing than having thought you were going to like go to university to then find you have to spend another year in your boring town with no job opportunities. Like I really do feel for those kids who are just stuck in the middle at the moment as well, even if they have managed to get their university places.
Yes. Sam, I mean, you've been out, I presume that was what your protest was about. I mean, how much kudos to the students, because those pesky kids, I mean, there's been a lot of joking on sort of social media, haven't there, about sort of the government being like a Scooby-Doo film, and those pesky kids have done it. And it was a lovely thing this week, because somebody came on and said, oh, these wretched young people, they don't need exam results, they should stop whining, or whinging, I think was the word. And sort of, well, they clearly proved they were right to whinge. This wasn't about whinging, this was about justice. I mean, sort of how much kudos sort of them do you give, or were there other factors in them succeeding, do you think?
I think, like I said before, the government realised that these are the voters of the future, and we've seen what happens to other political parties when they upset the students. They're pretty good at harnessing a bit of movement behind them and pushing forward on this issue. So well done to them. At the march, the protest that was on today, Ian Lavery was speaking, and he spoke to the young people who were there. There were a lot of young people there, which is great. It's nothing worse than talking about young people with no young people there. You kind of feel like, what's the point? And he spoke to them and he said, you know, we've won a battle, but welcome to the struggle. This is just the start. And unfortunately, the fight for your rights will continue for your whole lifetime, and there will be more battles, and you need to be there to fight them. One interesting, just to talk about the comments quickly, we're having some interesting conversations about Frank Spencer. Just a bit of some pictures and some YouTube links in case anybody doesn't know who he is, and a general consensus of Frank Spencer would be a better education secretary. a lovely little conversation about people's wedding stories. Jake correctly points out that BTECs have been forgotten about, and again, absolutely, you know, is it going to be Etonian students that are going to be affected by that? No. Anne Willis mentions about the thing about using the mock grades. Obviously mock exams were thrown in the air just like every other part of the education system, so it does seem ridiculous to use mock grades. We've got a comment from somebody who is affected. Denise says, as a parent of a year 11 student, I'm dreading this week's results for my son and his peers. And she talks about their mental health through this. Young people's mental health has been 100% in my mind through this whole time. I am somebody who didn't get the grades that I wanted to get to the university I wanted to get to, but at least I knew that was my fault. And it was still horrendous for me, a horrendous time for me to live through. Obviously it worked out all right because I ended up going to university and meeting that man who I've been married to for 10 years now. But so life doesn't always work out how I want it to, but at least mine was fair. I sat the exams and I didn't do the work. Another thing to add about what we were talking about, the algorithm earlier, and why more better off pupils were treated more favourably, is that the algorithm only applied to cohorts of over 15 students. So in classes which were smaller, the teacher assessed grades counted for more, and the algorithm applied to larger groups. Now, the only place you're going to get a cohort of yet less than 15 students is going to be a private school. The other thing about the algorithm is that it was set to maintain roughly the national results we've had previously. So all of these privately educated kids in smaller classes got grades that were more than what their teacher said they were going to get. and they nabbed an unfair amount of A's and A stars, and then everybody else in the country was shuffled down, and that's one of the reasons why the inequality was so huge. I find it really difficult to chalk it up to an accident. I don't see how you wouldn't have done like a test run on some data like last year's data and noticed the differences. I don't know why they never thought to add in things like you had kids doing their A-level Spanish who were actually Spanish speaking getting knocked down to C's and D's because of the algorithm. You know, these are really obvious things that anybody is thinking seriously about trying to work out what children should be achieving, should have been built in. So it's just absolutely disgusting, and I'm so glad it's been turned around.
Absolutely correct. Thank you so much. I mean, one of the things I heard was that they'd asked statistical experts to look at the algorithm, but they'd not signed them up to do so because those experts refused to sign to a no disclosure agreement. So they didn't run the algorithm past people who could have told them what was going on. And it was quite clearly sort of this kind of secrecy of government. Laura, sort of how much of an embarrassment has this been for the government? I mean, do you think it's going to secure any changes in the way they do things, or will they just plough on?
They will absolutely plough on. Yes, it's a huge embarrassment. It should be a huge embarrassment, and absolutely would. If the Labour Party did this, would be dragged through the mud for decades to come. But it feels to me like I don't know, it feels like a joke. It feels like they're trying to get kicked out and see what they can get away with. And as it turns out, they can do whatever they want. Like, this will be tomorrow's chip shop paper. Not that you can do that anymore, but because there'll be another thing that they do. And they just seem to keep getting away with it. One thing for me that I work for the teachers union. So looking at it from a teacher's point of view, these are professionals who have trained for years to educate our young people. The fact that we haven't taken their opinion into account is pathetic, quite frankly, and it is demeaning to the profession. These people have worked with these students for years, and they know the students and they know what they're capable of. Yes, there is always going to be some kind of human problem, you know, unconscious bias or what have you. We're only human at the end of the day, but surely the teachers who've worked hard and worked with these pupils for so long, their opinion carries much more weight than an algorithm that has been set up by people who have no clue who these people are. They're people at the end of the day. These young people who've taken their exams, who've worked hard, deserve to be looked at as individuals, not on an algorithmic scale. You know,
Laura,
it's pathetic.
Do you think that Gavin Williamson ought to be sacked, or do you think that it needs something more to happen?
I mean, I think it is at where we're at now, given that we've seen people be sacked and replaced. Theresa May, for example, has been replaced by Boris Johnson. I feel, yes, he should be sacked. Do you know, he's obviously done a terrible job, but you cut the head off a snake and it just gets replaced with somebody equally as bad. I think this particular situation in education, the whole system needs to change. It feels like the Tories are trying to do things to get themselves to the easiest way, the easiest point. They're trying to minimise. I'm sure they were trying to get teachers recognised who hadn't been to university, who hadn't trained to be a teacher. Anyone can do it because it's just teaching. And they're doing that with so many professions now. It's like, well, it doesn't really matter, we're not bothered, because they've got their little, as Samantha put it, their little cohort. They know who are the important people in society, who they care about. Everybody else just kind of gets left to do what they want and have to stay put where they are. And I feel like education's taking a massive hit. It's getting worse and worse. Teachers are not allowed to teach in the way they are best at teaching. Everything's about ticking boxes. I mean, just look at Ofsted, for example. I think it's a disappointing system because it is just putting far too much pressure on ticking those boxes and getting all the right paperwork. It's a pathetic system, and the Tories have been predominantly the ones to blame for that. So yes, Gavin Williamson should be sacked, but actually, my beliefs, the whole Tory government should be sacked. We should put somebody in who actually cares.
With a bit of luck. We're running out of time, people. Very briefly, Paul, I'm going to ask Paul, Charlotte and Sam the same question, and then I've got another question for Charlotte at the end. Paul, what needs to be done now? A couple of sentences.
It's we need to go back to basics, and we need to start looking. I don't want the Tories to do this, by the way, because they'll come up with an awful system, but we need to look at the system. This, the way it's been done has been absolutely horrendous. I'm not sure who it was, but the person who has the daughter in year 11, I think people need to be aware of what this system is actually asking to do. So this algorithm won't be run on Thursday. Sorry, it will be run on Thursday, but it will only upgrade people because they want certain schools to be upgraded. So if you're a previously high performing school, you underestimate your grades, that's not going to happen. You're going to be dragged up now. That's the way the algorithm's going to run. So it will advantage some people. It won't disadvantage anyone, but it will advantage other people, which in turn will disadvantage other people. The other thing is, it's not a teacher assessed grade that they're using. It's a centre assessed grade. And what they told centres, which is schools, they said, if your results look unusually high, you will be marked down. Okay, so schools took that into account, did their ranking system, and a lot of teachers have said, that child is going to get an A, or that student's going to get an A, that young person's going to get an A. And the centre have gone, yeah, but if we put them down as an A, we've already got 15 people who were saying we've got A, so that has to be a B. So centres have already applied a version of this algorithm because of the government threat. I know certainly certain schools probably would have just said any old thing because of the league table situation if they thought it was just that grade.
Thank you. I realise I'm being rude to everybody, but we are running out of time. Sam, thank you, by the way, for explaining that. It was really important. Sam, where do we need to go from here? What, sort of just tidy up this mess, move forward?
As Charlotte pointed out earlier, working class students and students from disadvantaged backgrounds are really disadvantaged by the idea of deferring their place to next year. I think deferring their place to next year is probably the right thing to do for them, but they need some kind of support in the meantime. That we can roll out some kind of national program like the National Citizenship Service, where they are given a 1 year fixed term job where they get some money and they do some good in their community, so that they stay on the path to education rather than getting distracted.
Brilliant idea. And Charlotte, what needs to happen to put this right?
I think it needs to kickstart a whole overhaul of the university system in terms of admissions and access, because I think this scandal's just revealed how wide the gap is in so many different ways between state comp educated kids and private school educated kids. When I was at Oxford, I saw some data that suggested that in the first year of uni, private school kids tend to outperform their working class peers, but by the end the gap had completely closed because people,
homesickness.
Yeah, well, universities do just kind of reproduce privilege in a lot of ways. They are restricted in a lot of ways through all sorts of things like money, education before university. So I think we need a lot more holistic way of looking at university admissions that take into account all of these procedures. And I think university life and knowledge in this country will just be bettered so much because of it.
I've got one question to ask you before we move on. I was arguing with somebody on social media, and I said, and the example of this is the poor girl I saw on the television who had been going to go to Oxford, but now Cambridge, sorry, and now she's got her grades. That's been cancelled. She's not able to go. And the person came back and he said, "There's something that's not a socialist thing at all. You have to be ashamed of yourself talking like that. What's the wrong with the other universities? It's elitist and disloyal to Durham to want to go to Oxbridge." I mean, have you any comments about that, Charlotte?
Huh, that's just daft. I mean, thing about that is like Durham University is quite disloyal to Durham as a community. People might have seen that the university's rolling out this voluntary redundancy scheme with its staff, with like, you know, the plans to make some of those permanent redundancies if they don't accept it. And the university's recently just kind of reviewed all of its staffing procedures and is planning to axe loads of like cleaning and support staff. So to be honest, maybe if Durham University started treating the local environment a bit better, then locals might be a bit more loyal to it.
I think one of the problems is that universities have become businesses, and a lot of the things that are wrong with universities can be boiled down to that. I went to Oxford, as you know, greatest moment of my life. If anybody has the chance to get there, the opportunities for study are just wonderful, and sort of it is not wrong. It is not unsocialist to have aspiration, because sort of the more you can learn, the more useful you can be when you come out. So sort of poo to that man. Sort of, I thought you'd smile about this. There are no listener guests this week. We've got, but he doesn't want to come on to the main show, does he?
He's got. We wouldn't have had time for him on the main show, so he's going to come on after.
That's all. I've just been sort of, you know, spinning it out a bit. But is he coming into the second half? Is he coming to the after show? Sort of. Well, he's very, very welcome. So we now, and I forgot the big story jingle, but I'll remember the other stories jingle. Let's have a jingle. Brilliant drumming. The reason we make such fuss about the drumming is that, Laura, am I right in thinking that you were the drummer on that?
Yes.
It was exciting drumming. And you'll notice I was headbanging to it, and all the others were headbanging in their heads. And the guests have given themselves cricks in the neck, sort of joining in.
It's available online if people want to download it. I'll put the link in.
I'm going to come to you, Charlotte, in this sort of, which dubious first place did Britain achieve this week, and what are your thoughts about that? What's happened?
Which dubious first place did we? Was it like the biggest GDP drop or something in Europe?
You get a point. Thank you very much. Yes, that's right.
I paid attention this week. Well done.
So what's happened, and is it a bad thing anyway?
Yeah, it's a devastating thing. You know, seeing things like Marks and Spencer's announced 7,000 job losses. I think that the real kind of blow of this pandemic is definitely going to be on ordinary workers. But then, you know, you look at America, and what's happening in their stock market at the moment is that it's all the share prices are going up to what they were like before the lockdown, before the crisis hit. So, you know, for some companies are going to act in a way that just kind of protects their directors, protects the shareholders, but then at the same time announce enormous job losses. What really would have been good in like the sort of aftermath of coronavirus is for government policymakers to recognise the importance of people like cleaners, people who obviously like nurses, public transport drivers, all the key workers who we went out and clapped for every Thursday night. But I think they're going to be the people who take the greatest blow from all of this. And you know, in the fact of the matter is that the planet's doomed if we don't act soon to protect ourselves from the impacts of climate change. You know, like we are producing and expanding and growing at a rate where they're just like, we aren't going to be able to support the planet and its ecosystem for much longer at this rate. And coronavirus would have been a good opportunity to start thinking about decarbonising and like degrowth in a way that protected people's jobs and livelihoods. But so far, I'm not seeing any indications of that.
Not at all. Useless. All the promises, just we were lied to. It's they're not. They're sort of. They're just protecting their own patch. Sam, I mean, any comments? Who's to blame?
Of course, the Conservatives are to blame. No, I mean, what I think we need to really seriously look at now is a well-being economy and a well-being budget. We've had growth in GDP, and if that doesn't translate into better conditions for the regular run-of-the-mill person who works on the Tesco checkouts, then what is it for? If all the GDP is being sucked into tax havens and all the rest of it, you know, it's not doing what it's meant to do. The whole idea of growing GDP is we all get more stuff, but that's not what happens. So we need to fix that.
Laura?
Yeah, I just thought it was really interesting when I've been reading a few articles about what's been happening with GDP, and they're all sort of phrased in a way that because the UK has been locked down for longer, because the government have done this, that, and the other, framing it in a way that we are sort of failing in GDP because the government have done such a good job of keeping us safe. And the inference being that they've been so good at keeping us locked down for longer than any other country. And it's like, actually, had they locked us down sooner, then none of this needed to happen. It would have been a much shorter time for a lockdown. And I just think it goes to show that the media outlets that we have do still buy into the fact that the government, they try and sell the idea that the government are doing the best possible thing for us. And even my friends and family still go, oh no, but they're trying their best. And it's like, well, no, because had they locked down sooner, had Boris Johnson gone to Cobra meetings at the beginning, had anybody taken an interest in the early days when it was like, do you know there's this virus kicking about in China that maybe we should have a look at? Every other world leaders went. Why didn't we? We could have. I mean, even New Zealand. Did you know they've probably dealt with it? In my opinion, one of the best countries in the world. They've dealt with it so well, and even they are still getting outbreaks now, and they are on top of them straight away. If they'd done that, then we wouldn't have had to have been locked down for quite as long. Businesses wouldn't have been shut for quite as long. Furlough wouldn't have gone on for quite as long. So you can't market it now as, do you know what, we are losing the money and everything, but it's because the government have really done well. It's not. It's because the government acted badly.
On this, I don't actually blame the government. I think that a lot to do is the nature of our economy, which is a service economy, which is going to be hit much harder by a period of enforced sitting at home and not spending your money. Sort of, I was talking to Jamie Driscoll on the thing last week, actually, and he said we've managed to create a society which is just selling coffee to each other. And sort of, and I rely on you to sell coffee to me, and you rely on me to sell coffee. Whatever. And
no, but I entirely agree with that, John, and you're absolutely right in that.
It's just collapsed under the weight of sort of having to sit at home for a while. Paul, what's your take on all this? What needs to be done?
I think we need to have a look at rebalancing our economy so that we actually produce things. We need to look at that. We also need to look at other measures that maybe aren't GDP, because GDP isn't the be all and end all. The other thing I'm worried about with GDP is spread over an entire economy. Now with all of Richie Sunak's giveaways, etc., a lot of money is being pumped into the economy, but as Samantha says, that seems to be finding its way into the hands of the wealthiest. So we're seeing that the wealthiest people have increased their wealth quite a lot. I don't have the figures to hand, but it was an alarming amount. in some cases up to a third. So they are increasing that, and that is part of our GDP as well. So if they're increasing their wealth, the very wealthiest, what effect is there? Is it worse than this 20%? Is it worse for ordinary people than it actually looks through GDP? So I think we need to be looking at a more balanced economy. Richie Sunak has shown the money is there. You can invent money. You know, it's not a household income kind of situation. If you're a currency issuer, you can issue some currency. It's where it ends up that's important. And in our society, we keep on seeing that deficit ending up in the bank accounts of billionaires. That's the problem we've got, and that's the problem we need to solve.
Thank you. I'm going to leave that with that very powerful statement. I'm sorry to be rude to everybody, but we're now down to the last few minutes. I'm going to read you a thing that appeared on my timeline on Twitter and ask you what you think about this. Today I drove through a holiday seaside village, says this chap. It was absolutely packed. Folks were walking in front of the traffic because the footpaths were so rammed. No masks to be seen. Shoulder to shoulder, they stood outside the chippy and the ice cream shops. The bars were heaving. COVID-19 seemed to have bypassed their thought processes. I have no doubt this COVID melting pot was replicated in holiday places all around the UK. I can guarantee it was, because we were at in Whitby the other day. Yesterday, the government put quarantine in place, Ray France. Maybe they should do something about the idiots I saw today in a UK village. Laura, have we just decided that we couldn't give a shit about coronavirus anymore and we're going to get back to normal?
I don't think it's that we don't give a shit about coronavirus anymore. It's really difficult. I don't buy into the idea that people in the UK are idiots. I do think we need to think the best of people, but people have had enough. People have really had enough. This has gone on for far too long, longer than it needed to go on for. And when the government are giving unclear messages and telling people, you can do this, but you can't do this, and you can do this, people are just like, do you know what, I'm just going to go out. I haven't caught it. So
you think so, Laura? Do you not think this is just a rebellion against the government, an anarchic rebellion against the government?
Because, and this is the problem we've got, we are engaged with politics. Most people aren't. Most people are too busy trying to keep a roof over their heads, trying to feed their families, trying to do something. People are fed up with being stuck in. And if the government sort of relax the lockdown, then it's like, okay, well, of course we're going to go out. Of course we're going to take our families out. I don't think it's a rebellion as such.
Just fed upness. Charlotte Austin.
Fed up, yeah.
I strongly agree with what Laura says. I don't want to get into a blame game. I think you got to think about the effects on people's mental health of being stuck in the house for a really long time, not seeing their friends, not seeing their family. And of course things are going to get like packed in seaside towns. I think people are just making like a calculation in their heads every time they go out and thinking like, yes, I could catch the virus, but likelihood is I won't now, because it's not really like, you know, it's nowhere near the scenes we saw at the start of, you know, like April, where like your hospitals were getting overwhelmed and stuff. There's less COVID going around. It's weaker, the virus that people are actually catching, because it's spread through person to person.
Sam, do you blame social media for some of the things that Charlotte's talking about, that people are being told that nobody's dying, people are being told we don't need to wear a mask, they're no use? I mean, what sort of, how do you explain the thing that Charlotte's been describing?
There's definitely some worrying stuff about social media. Lots of fake news, lots of conspiracies, lots of talk about, you know, one of my friends who is a paramedic actually had to video himself putting a mask on with an oxygen monitor on his finger to prove that his oxygen levels weren't affected by him wearing a mask. And he did that because he reshared a video by another doctor and they accused him of being a paid stooge. So he did it himself so it could be seen by the community. So there is a worrying amount of that. But the fact is, the government's telling people to get out the house. The government's telling people to go to the shops. The government's telling people to book a staycation. And, you know, so when the weather is hot, people will go to the beach when they're able to. And when you've got in the car, especially if you've got kids, you've committed to a set of actions. So it's very difficult to get to the beach, look around, go, it's pretty busy, I'm going to go home now.
I'm going to cut you off there, but absolutely correct me. What my wife Barbara says is, she says that the government is to blame because they've just put the economy, which is tanking, we've just seen, before people, and they don't give a damn. Get out and get your money spent. Paul, you have literally 60 seconds, and then I'm going to pull all this to a close and finish the show. What's your thought about this? Have we just sort of given up on coronavirus?
I just think people are confused and people are sick. I can't really add much to what people have said, apart from the fact that when you're being told that you can't visit your nana at a house, but you can go to the pub with her, I think once you start saying stupid things like that, it's not about. And then you see the economy's doing terribly, but they prioritise the economy like they did at the beginning. It's just an absolute mess. And then there's a lot of of that entitled mentality going around as well. Like, oh, we've got this blitz spirit. Will somehow be okay if we all just go out, and it's all mixed up. Everything's a bit of a mess at the moment. Clear instructions, it could have been okay, but it's an absolute mess.
Thank you so much. The dream team, Paul, Laura, Sam, just thank you so much. You are such stars. Absolutely wonderful. As always, interesting, insightful, and putting up with me interrupting you all the time. Charlotte, what an honour for us to have you on the show. I mean, always good value for money. But the fact of the matter is that we don't pay you, by the way. But nevertheless, just fantastic that you've been on. What have you got to mention, Charlotte, before you leave us?
Subscribe to Red Pepper,
right.
The best socialist, environmentalist quality magazine. Pay as you feel. I'll drop the link in the comments.
Thank you. And you didn't make half enough of the need for a green industrial revolution, and your very, very important role on the NPF in trying to get the Labour Party to a point where it will actually try to bring that about. So thank you so very, very much.
Keep the red flag flying here.